Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone coming on. Welcome to today's session. If you want to just put in chat what state you're from, Michael, myself, and Bridget will be here with you today. Oklahoma, Texas, Arizona,
Hey
Tennessee.
Don, am I frozen on video?
Yes, you are frozen on video.
Okay.
Maybe if you turn off your video, then your sound will be Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama,
All right, yay,
Oklahoma.
Louisiana.
You're in Louisiana now, Michael.
No, I'm in Texas actually, Tejas.
Okay.
I'm,
It has South Dakota, Washington State, Michigan. I was in Michigan last week. South Carolina, U.S. Virgin Islands. Awesome. Thank you for being here with us. Massachusetts, Florida. Awesome. Hawaii. Welcome. Virginia. All right, great. I'm glad everyone is coming in from all over. You're not late, Parrish. You're fine. We are just getting started. We are a little late ourselves. So we will, move right along, and it looks like folks are coming in, and we'll do all of the little housekeeping pieces first, and Michael will lead us in our introduction. I'll just do this very first slide. Thank you for putting the state that you're in. So we'll be talking about the infant and early childhood mental health promotion, prevention, and treatment today. And thank you for being here with the National Training and Technical Assistance Center for Child, Youth, and Family Mental Health. Michael?
Sure. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I've got to say that this is probably one of the joys of my professional life is to be able to talk about two things that I'm really passionate about. The first is certainly infant and early childhood mental health. Um, I just, it's all, I'm just so passionate about it that I weave it into almost everything I do. And then when I get to do it with my colleague, and I prefer to say friend, Don, it's even more of a joy. And so we're going to have a conversation today. And it's going to be a conversation about infant and early childhood mental health. Now, the other part that I'm passionate about is family. And one of the things that I would say that if you walk away from this presentation today, one of the things that is really important to understand and remember is that Don, I, and just about everyone else who is involved in doing this work as a professional or with letters behind our name, either have children or have been children or are in families where children, very young children, are a very important part of our lives. And just because we have those titles and we have these roles, it does not mean that we are perfect or that we always get it right. And so please, whatever you do and whatever situation you have, remember to give yourself grace when you consider parenting and the relationships that you have with young children, because you will get some things wrong. We get things wrong. And so if we look at the first slide, um, and for some reason it got really short on my, just a second. There we go. We have a couple of housekeeping things that we need to do. And one is that to help everyone understand that this is a presentation that has been prepared by the National Training and Technical Assistance Center, NTAC, which is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And so these, although they fund us, the thoughts and the things that are exchanged are our ideas and not necessarily SAMHSA's, even though they support us. We also have to, in this day and age, think about session security. Say that 3 times, session security. I'm going to stop after 2. One of the things about that is that if our session is hijacked or something happens to it, we will shut it down. Everyone who has registered will get an email quite soon to tell you where to rejoin us. And so that's how we protect everyone's interest from cyber attacks and phishing and all of that stuff. So Who is intact? Well, we are a group of agencies that have come together with the understanding of supporting system of care grantees, but also children and family mental health. And so the Center for Applied Research and Solution, CARS, is the contracted agency, along with Change Matrix. We also have the Center for Child and Human Development out of Georgetown University. I'm a faculty member there, as is Don. So American Academy of Pediatrics, Youth Move, that youth voice that we will talk about, MedStar, and also the University of Texas, Austin, and Fredla, family members. And so many of you are representing or a part of that of the Fredla family. We are so happy to have you. And so we've designed this slide to show the array of services that we have. We provide individual consultation. We also have a technical assistance to communities that we provide. Everything is customized. We also try to develop tools that we think everyone can benefit from if you're doing work within system of care. But if you're also working with families or children and need some guidance, we are here to help that. And if we don't have the answer, we typically know who can help us. That's one of the cool things about this, is that I've met so many people through my work with the TA Center that are just brilliant in the different areas of youth voice, family voice, and all of these other areas that I know something about. But if I really want what the experts are thinking, Impact is a good place to start your search. And so these are some commonly asked questions that you will get a certificate after this event. You can get a copy of the presentation, and we are recording parts of what we do. One of the things that's very important for us and for our participants is that we make sure that we are able to speak freely and understand that what we say is not going to be taken by someone who may take it out of context later. So we have what we think are some controls in order, but we do record our sessions from time to time, or parts of it. And with that, I will pass it to my colleague and friend, Don.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again. I'm glad folks are settled in, and looks like we have a little over 100 folks with us today. So I'm happy to have everyone here. And we'll do breakout rooms a little later, and I know it might be kind of hard to have most folks share, but we'll do our best to get folks into a smaller room, and you'll just be sharing with yourselves in a breakout room. But welcome. Next slide. And I'll just share a little bit of myself. So there's myself and Michael, and Michael always doesn't give himself enough credit in how he's contributed to the infant mental health field, and all of the giants that he's worked with, who kind of founders of the Western way of thinking about infant mental health. And I'll let you share a little bit about that just in a minute, Michael. But just really quickly for me, early in my career, I did do clinical therapy. And then as I went along in my career, I kind of went away from it and came back indirectly. I worked as an infant and early childhood mental health consultant on the Navajo Nation for about 8 years, and just recently stepped away from that role in this past June. But I still love to be in these spaces of working directly with those that are in care of children, and do a little bit of that with technical assistance. As Michael said, I'm also with Georgetown University, and I also have other private consulting work that I do on the side. Michael, do you want to say something real quickly about your prior work? Oh, we might have lost
That
Michael.
I'm not very tech savvy. Something very quickly about my work. As Don said, yes, I have worked with a lot of the giants. And one of the things about working with Don is that you are often reminded, no matter all of the giants that I've worked with, I can say, oh, I work with this person who worked with that person, and they've been doing this work for probably 50, 60, 70 years. And we often get caught up in this Western way of trying to understand who we are. But the reality is that when you speak to someone who's a First People, someone who's a Native American, who understands their history, you find out that there's an incredible wealth of history that is not decades, not even centuries old, but several centuries of we have been doing this on this land, and we have been taking care of babies and children and passing on from um, from generation to generation the tribal knowledge that we have and what's important. And so I offer up that one of the things that we're going to share today is tribal knowledge, if that's okay, to about working within the realm of infant mental health, but also with families and communities. That's as quick as I can go, Don.
Sorry, I was muted there. That works, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, I, would love to, if we have time, share little pieces of, the Navajo culture. And I found working in tribal communities across the country, there's a lot of differences, yes, and there are some similarities. But thank you for honoring that and saying that, Michael, about, that we have had these practices for millennia, thousands of years. And, just looking at it in a different context is something that's kind of more challenging for us. But we all, are kind of trained in this Western way and speak English, and but definitely translate it to your own native language, whatever that may be for you, and thinking about maybe teachings that your elders have passed on to you about raising children. So we'll go through welcome it. We did that. So what is defining it? What is infant mental health? And then also, what would we like for our children's future? Stories to share, brain development, and it's a little mixed here, but that's okay. We'll get through it. We do have our small discussion Q&A. Next slide. And I just want to share, if you have a question, jump in. Michael and I are here for you. Bridget is our wonderful tech support. And put it in the chat too. If I, can see it pop up right away, I'll, address the question. So definitely jump in anytime. We would like this to be interactive. So, if you haven't heard of the definition, infant toddler mental health, infant and early childhood mental health, sometimes those are used synonymously, and sometimes it's just like social and emotional learning. I've heard people refer to it. So all of those, can sometimes be interchangeable in the way we talk about it. But it really is like prenatal to 5, birth to 5, really supporting children in their developing abilities, capacity from birth to 5 to be able to form close and secure adult caregiver relationships and peer relationships as they get a little older. And then it's also to support their developing abilities to experience, manage, and express a full range of emotions. So like, every human being has anger. Every human being probably feels some happiness and joy, right? It's what we do with it that's really important. And this is the age where we learn, I'm really upset and mad. I got big feelings. I want to scream. And, infants scream and cry. But later, how do they learn to manage it? A 1-year-old doesn't know how to manage it, and they might go in and hit somebody or bite someone. They haven't learned yet what's, appropriate in the way they can express their anger and frustrations and big feelings. So, that's a part of this definition of infant mental health, is supporting them and learning about those emotions and helping them to manage it. Exploring the environment, helping them explore the environment and learn, and doing all of these things at once in the context of a family, a community, and in culture, no matter what culture it is and where we are in the world. And sometimes homes have different cultures. One home can have different, if you have multiple families in one home, sometimes you have different cultures. So, really interesting in how we all are. And in the field of infant mental health, there are strategies that we use to improve, children's mental health. And it's always with a caregiver someone who is in a relationship with a child. And the way that, yes, there's promotion. We promoting infant mental health, supporting, educating families and caregivers, and then prevention, like, to prevent further long-term bigger issues around mental health. And then also the treatment continuum. In infant mental health, there are some therapists who are trained, mental health therapists who are trained to learn about birth to 5, like what does infant mental health look like? What does depression look like in a 2-year-old? What does depression look like in a 3-year-old? So there is a specialization that folks can be trained for. And then in promotion, prevention, and treatment continuum, just examples here are, anyone can be trained in infant mental health. For example, I know of teachers, Head Start teachers, early childhood teachers, who have this infant mental health way of looking at things, but they're not trained in mental health, but they, have this a lot of insights and skills that they've developed on their own, being teachers of young children. And sometimes we just don't know, oh, that I do that. That's what, I have an infant mental health lens. Sometimes we just have to think about and learn about, have time to slow down in our work and think about what we do, learn about it in other ways that I guess they're labeled, maybe. And then in early childhood, child welfare and pediatrics, anyone in those fields can have an infant mental health lens. And then there's infant mental health licensed therapists that I just described. So they do provide treatment to young children. And next slide. So here's just a little visual of like someone who has an infant mental health way of seeing things. In the field, we are taught to always have a trauma-informed approach. And with a trauma-informed approach, we may see a child or a family that is struggling, and instead of asking what's wrong with them or what's wrong with a child, we ask, what happened? I'm here to support. I want to understand what happened. And then with developmental knowledge is knowing each of these areas of development. So thinking, learning, cognitive, social skills, and emotional skills, what I just described about regulating emotions, learning how to express emotions, adaptive skills, independent skills, language, learning how to communicate and speak. Language is body language as well, crying, yelling. Physiologic is growth and development. How you may take young children to your shots, and the pediatrician checks their growth and weight and head circumference, and so all of that is physiologic development. Are they following along in a typical way at their age? And then attachment theory is something that anyone can learn about, and particularly if you're an infant and early childhood mental health therapist or an infant and early childhood mental health consultant, these are really important pieces to come with. And the other part of the infant mental health field, what I really like is incorporated is self-reflection. Me as a professional, or teacher has an infant mental health lens, her as a professional, him as a professional, really stepping back and thinking, having that time to self-reflect. How was I with that child? How was I in this moment? Or you think back on your day, or during your quick restroom break, or if you have a restroom break, during your lunch break, and all of those different little pieces. You have that time to self-reflect, and you have someone to do it with. So this is infant mental health in kind of like a visual, but children grow in these areas, all these areas, when they are in a nurturing, responsive relationship with caregivers. And I think something that we don't really know about is a child's physical growth, their physiologic growth can stop or be stunted or slowed down if there is a challenge in the child caregiver relationship. It just has that powerful of an effect. So if we think about social development, emotional development, that caregiver relationship with a child, a healthy relationship, nurturing and responsive, it's just as important as food. It's just as important as water. So just want to put that there. Next slide. Michael, jump in anytime as well. Next slide. I think you're a mute.
So sorry. I just wanted to say one thing. What Don said about anyone can do infant mental health is so true. And I'm a storyteller, and I'll do this one really quick. But for those of you who are younger, in the 90s and 80s, there was a crack epidemic. And one of the places that was hit real hard was New York City. And there was a woman who lived in Harlem, African American woman, and I can't remember her name, but it was Mother something, her last name. And when she saw all of these babies being born addicted to crack, she decided to go to the hospitals and start holding these babies. And one of the things about babies that are exposed to stimulants like crack is that they're hypersensitive to touch. But here's this woman who also recruited some of her friends to go, and I always do this when I talk about it, but to hold the babies. And what that was doing, that was infant mental health. That was infant mental health by a woman who, some reports was she may have had a high school or less education. But one of the things that happened is that the nursing staff and the medical staff begin to see that, wow, these babies are being able to be held and being able to make the bonds. And with their brains being at that stage where plasticity is such an important part, they saved a lot of lives. And the program was replicated and recognized by George Bush Sr. as a 1,000 Points of Light program, and it got all this praise. And one of the things I tell people is that back then, we used to talk about, well, these crack babies are going to grow up to be running the streets and hitting people on the heads and all that, and just being very aggressive. But I challenge you to, I see I'm having a challenge being heard, but so I'm going to hopefully, well, um, change my audio system. Hopefully you can hear me. But the challenge is that today there aren't those adults that we have feared. And so I'm going to go offline and try to recommend Don, if you can hear me.
Yeah, you're clear now. Yeah, when you
Okay.
was your spot there. Yeah.
So my point in the story is that when Don talks about anyone can do infant mental health, that is absolutely true. It is willing to have the relationship with the child and support the child. And so when we talk about infants, let's talk about the people that are in the lives of the infant. And maybe we need to find a better name other than infant mental health. But I'll get with the PR department and see what we can come up with. But the reality is that just having those relationships are so important and they matter.
Thank you, Michael. Next slide. Okay, so if we think about, share out loud or in chat, if you think about a child, your child, or maybe a family and you're thinking about their child, just share in chat or speak out loud. What do we want for them? What do we want for their future? As I remember as a young parent, when I had my first child, I was painfully young. I want all the best things in life for them. But was I equipped as a really young parent? I was not. And I'm always the first to say, I'm not the best parent, but I'm working to be better. And now my youngest one is 10, and I'm still working to be a better parent. And so if we think about, what do we want for them? I see in chat, Lisa shared. Yeah, we want safety, security, love, right? Yeah. We want them to be happy. Maybe you want them to be contributing citizens in their communities. Yeah, success in whatever way that shows up for them, right? Confidence, strong attachment, productive members. Yes, well-rounded. Right, right. The investment of their caregivers. Yes, we want, folks around them to support them, right? So that they can grow up to be, strong young adults and, strong men and women as, yes, confident, able to advocate for themselves. Yes, so important. So I wanted to have you think about that because I would, really love to, have us kind of all be, you know, we're not striving for perfection, as Michael said. We're all here together in learning together, and even as mental health professionals, and me becoming a mental health professional, I had children young, and the mistake, I think about the mistakes that I made and think about, gosh, why didn't I apply what I was learning, in this situation with my own child? All of these things that can get in our way in life and affect how we parent children, or if we're a teacher, it can affect how we build a relationship with a child. Um, so if we think about, learning how to regulate and manage big emotions, the first place they learn is from caregivers, whether it's mom or dad, whether it's, let's say the little one's adopted and it's their adopted parent, it's a grandparent, it's an aunt or an uncle who is caring for them. So this part of learning how to express emotions in a healthy way, is what I mentioned earlier, but really important. And if we think about, um, for young children, having that solid emotional and social foundation, that sets the whole stage and trajectory for their later mental health. But if you just think about, can you think of someone maybe when you were really young, as young as you can remember, that maybe had an influence on you, whatever way it might be, maybe positive, negative, and maybe you learned something from that. I have references of both positive and negative when I was really young. And I think about, where when I was a young parent and became frustrated, I had started to yell. And then later when I got older, I like, where's this yelling coming from? And my mom was a yeller. I shared this with her, and she's, I know, I know. But, if you think about, okay, we learn these ways of parenting, they're passed down generationally. And we think of, okay, what did it take for me to stop my yelling to my children, as I became a better parent? Um, and, learning how to get along with others, really important for young children. Next slide. Because when they learn how to get along with others, um, primarily it's you and the child and caregiver. And with that part of learning how to get along with others, the caregiver is the very first person that they start to learn from. And then they transfer that to, let's say they're in preschool or in childcare, they transfer that to their peers. Anything you want to share on that, Michael?
No, I think that was a beautiful illustration, and I really invite you to follow Don's advice, offer to think about growing up, the people that when you were young that were in your corner. Um, there's the idiom that what every child needs to be successful is an adult who is irrationally crazy about them. And it is so true that when young children have those people that they know, that they just think about, I'm special to that person. And that is often beyond parent, the parents that they have. It's just that we're building social context. We're building the ability to trust others. We're building an understanding that the world is a safe and predictable place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll just add in there, if you want to share in the chat, anyone that you kind of, can think of who had an influence on you when you were really young, from, you know, before the age of 8 years old. And even in your high school days, it's interesting. There's huge brain growth and development early in life. And we're kind of skipping ahead here, but um, teenage years are very similar for young children in brain growth and development. Both are going through exponential brain growth and also physiologic growth, right? Little ones don't know how to regulate emotions yet. They're just now building brain connections for that area. And teenagers are emotional because of hormones, right? So it's like, so they kind of need similar things to be acknowledged and seen in those stages of their life. But really quickly, I'll share a story of my kindergarten teacher and first grade teacher were both really wonderful. My kindergarten teacher, I think, started me off on this love of popcorn. She would bring in her popcorn machine and she would get these little sheets of paper and we'd stand in line and then we would make these little cones And then she would staple it on the bottom, and we go get in line and get our popcorn in our cone, and we'd have a little movie day. And so I have 5 children, and guess what their favorite snack is? Popcorn. So you see how generationally things pass down. So who would have known my kindergarten teacher would have an influence 2 to 3 generations ahead of her? So that's just how powerful this age frame is, birth to 5. Yeah, Bridget, you guessed right, popcorn. So I saw, Bridget, that you shared your grandmother and grandfather had a big, yeah, and others, grandmother, yes. Summer camp counselor. Oh, okay, yeah. Just able, so supportive and available to talk to. Yes. So, lots of folks in our lives, and, doesn't necessarily mean it always has to be our family members, but, it can be others as well. A number of people in our lives that had an influence on us. Okay, next, let's go ahead and play this. What's the next slide here? The child never taught to talk. Okay. About my feelings. Yeah, therefore, as an adult in my 20s, I struggled with that. Yeah, till I realized why, I reflected and taught myself. Yes, Denise, thank you for sharing that. I don't know many adults who are taught that too, even in my age as well. I wasn't taught that young, so I had to learn that for myself. So I can relate, Denise. Okay, so let's see who knows brain development. When does the brain begin to develop? Any guesses or call outs? Just unmute yourself or in utero, yes, before birth, right? So 2 to 3 weeks after conception is when those neural cells start to develop. So neural tube is what it's called. We look like a little shrimp, I guess, early in life. Yeah, in utero, very young. Okay, in the womb, right? So, okay, at what age is 90% of our brain cell connections made? Anyone want to take guesses? So I see 26. It's a good guess. Any others? 26, 90%. 5. Stevie has the right answer. Yes. So, but yes, by a child's 5th birthday, 90% of brain cell connections are made. By a child's 3rd birthday, 85% are made. 60, yeah, let's try a little younger. But they say that, when we start losing brain cells is around our early 20s, the aging process begins, right? But what's interesting is that with young children, if we think about it, and when I've done trainings, when I was a mental health consultant, and sometimes there was a preschool in a school, elementary school, and then the principal was kind of the one who oversaw the preschool. And so I would do trainings for preschool teachers, and then the principal one day, one of my sites, she was like, can you do this training too with preschool and the kindergarten through 5th grade teachers? And I said, sure, as long as the preschool teachers are there. So I did that, and I was teasing them one day, and I said, during this same presentation, and I said, so we saved 10% of brain development for K through 12 and beyond. So if we think about, where do you want to have the impact? Birth to 5, really young, which is why, advocate for babies, advocate for preschools and Head Starts and childcare, advocate for home visiting programs, advocate for early intervention programs. Yes, next slide. Thank you, folks, for being brave and sharing your ages that you guessed there. And so there are, teachable moments for parents and caregivers. All behavior is communicating an unmet need or a developmental concern. So for little infants, they're born, they're crying. If we think about birth, the process of it, really traumatic, right? We are in this little warm space. We hear this heartbeat of our mom. We hear their voice. And then all of a sudden we're pushed out, and it's cold and it's loud and it's bright. And, where's that heartbeat? Where's the voice? So if we think about, birth is traumatic, and who's there immediately to help us recover from that traumatic event? Potentially traumatic event, right? Yeah, the first trauma. Yes. And then, how do we overcome that? So if we all went like this, we put our hand on our neck, our fingers on our neck here, and on our artery, and we, maybe we're resting, maybe we're walking, maybe we're moving. What is our resting pulse? They say for adults, what, 50 to 60, I think. is resting maybe per minute. And for like children 2 years old, resting is 120 beats per minute, 100 to 120. So, really fast for them, it's resting. But once we get out of our, let's say we start laughing or we start crying, our heart rate goes up for adults and for young children. Okay. So let's say something happens. Let's say right away, let's say the birth process, right? Or let's say a little one trips and falls and hits their knee. The first ideal response, what happens? Let's say, oh, you're busy, you're doing something, a teacher's busy, little one falls, you're already helping one here, and you don't respond. And let's say, oh, you're okay, you're fine, you'll get up. And the little one's rolling on the floor, crying, holding their knee, and they continue to cry even louder until, someone has a really strong, nurturing, caregiving response to the child. Then they start to calm down. Okay. Their heart rate goes down, their breathing slows down, kind of goes back to normal. And if it's a birth process, let's say that first stimulus is, oh, baby's, upset and mad and crying. Okay, well, we got to cut the cord. We got to do the, wrap him up. And that may not be the most kind response first, but then when baby is, the cord is cut and then baby maybe is put on mom right away and, skin to skin. And mom is like, oh, baby, oh my gosh, you're here. And mom's crying and, happy and, whatever it might be. Or let's say it's a, not mom, but maybe adoptive mom. They put skin to skin on adoptive
Or
dad.
dad.
Yes, yes, adoptive dad. I don't want to forget dads, Michael.
Yes.
Right. So, when that connection happens to support, then the heart rate goes down and breathing goes down back to normal. So remember, all behavior communicates an unmet need or a developmental concern. Next
Yeah,
slide.
and
Oh, go
well,
ahead.
if I
Yes.
may add to that,
Yes.
there are two words that we often throw around, both start with the letter R, and they are resiliency and repair. And what Don just shared with us was an example of both of those. And when we talk about resiliency, a lot of people want to think about a rubber ball and things bouncing back. But in actuality, when we talk about resiliency in early childhood and with people, it's really about the ability to incorporate what has happened and to move on, and so that things are not as challenging or as bad. So it's how do we incorporate what has happened so that we're able to have ownership over it for adults to process it. That is resiliency. It's not wanting to go back to where we were before, but it is indeed being able to take what has happened and become a better or more whole person. She also described the process of repair, and that things will be sometimes chaotic, sometimes traumatic, like the birthing process, but that repair starts when you're doing the skin to skin. And again, what is happening with that very young mind and all the synapses and things that are firing? It's building those connections that, wow, if this happens, I can pretty well predict that mom, dad, someone who cares about me will be there to nurture me. There is nothing more sadder than a child that has been neglected and hasn't been able to build those connections of, if I cry, someone will come to comfort and soothe me. And that's a whole nother presentation. But I just really like the way Don was able to draw um, resiliency and repair in her examples.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, and I see in the chat here you kind of alluded to, Haley asked about what about children that are born and their parents are in jail. That is a great question because it really depends on what is that jail or the facility's policy about, birthing mothers, um, birthing parents. What is that policy? Do they immediately take them away? Do they give them time to, build a relationship or not? How is, the birthing parent? Are they able to be in a relationship with another. So, if you think about that, it really depends on, that particular family, in that case, that situation. But, this is one of the reasons I advocate for infant mental health. I think every doctor, every nurse, every judge, every social worker, every probation officer, everyone needs to learn about infant mental health, because if you have an adult, there's most likely a young child in their life. They need to know how to support and ask about and think about them, so that we do some prevention, while we're with the adult, supporting the adult, do some prevention work and support, putting a safety net, beginning to build a safety net around a young child in their life. And
And
then, yeah, go ahead.
no, I would just say with the children born to parents in jail, it's about building routines and predictability. And the reality is that they may not be able to be with mom and dad, but the one thing that we don't want to see is moving from A to B to C to D, but to have a stable routine where, with hope, when mom and dad are able to care for the child, a transition can be made that will respect that understanding of how important it is to have routines and relationships that are supportive. And so it's work on two fronts, actually. It's not just the child, but it's also the adults in the lives. And it's not just the parents who aren't available, but those parents that are, or parent figures that are providing the care, need to be oftentimes coached or trained in that, what is the plan and how can we make this as routine or predictable for the child as possible.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. And I see another question in the chat. Are there some studies being done on in utero trauma and its effects in early childhood behavior? I think there are some that I've heard. I don't know if you've heard of some.
I have, and I can't pull one as an example right now, but I can tell you that one of the things that we do know is that we're building narratives for our young children, and so I'm often amazed. I come from Louisiana. My family's a Creole family, and there are so many things that happen around birth that predict things. And for example, with me, I never crawled. I just pulled up and started walking. And there were all of these things about, okay, what does that mean? Michael will probably have to crawl before he dies, and all of these things, and so but there were people that said, you will have the gift of gab. Hopefully, you are seeing that. It's We build. So when there's a trauma, it's really important to understand. What does that mean to the caregivers, and how are we going to share that with the child? If the trauma also results in some type of harm that is long lasting for the child, like a physical disability, again, we want to build a narrative that despite all of these challenges, you are here and you are strong as the child grows. And so, yeah, it is absolutely something that is can be on the radar for parents, and it's understanding how to respond to the questions of the parents, but as the child develops, answering those questions that are asked.
Right. Thank you for that, Michael. I see another one. I'll get to yours, Jessica, but I also had someone direct message me and just ask about, they sometimes hear parents say, oh, if a little one falls and they hurt themselves, just let them let them almost like have them pull themselves up
Okay,
by the bootstraps, and
well,
don't respond, let them cry it out. And but there's this, they put in the chat, there's this level of having a gauged response. And yes, that's what it's about. You, the caregiver, coming and supporting, and not in an over exaggerated, oh my god, this huge loud what have in a really gate, but the child knows you're responsive and you're nurturing and supporting them,
mhm.
because over time, that I need help, come to me. When they get older, they will say, oh, I can help myself, I know what to do.
And sometimes dads get a bad rap, like the time that this dad I know was walking in to see the third child and had a child on the shoulder, didn't see that door was lower and the kid hit his head, and all the nurses rolled their eyes, and they're like, dads. Um, I can tell you that when I hear this, one of the things that I go to, I have two granddaughters, ages 2 and 1. And right now, despite all of the letters and all of the work that I've done, my daughter is like, yeah, Dad, we got this. And she's right. We have to be able to kind of be able to hold back. Sometimes it's about kind of taking that posture. And when you see things that aren't quite what you would do, you don't tell them that they're doing wrong. And I'm talking about young parents because they want to know that they're competent. You can wonder aloud, I wonder what would happen if, or I remember we did this. And so then you're not saying you got to do this or you have to do that. And it's that skill of supporting the parents to support the child that really develops into a teachable moment, as Don said earlier. Here are, we are often present as wiser older people. And what we have, especially with transition age youth, is just the desire to be seen as competent and care for parents. And so I would say, yeah, there are times we have to say, whoa, 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 you can't do that. But more often than not, it's about you really love your child and you're doing that. Um, Maybe we ought to consider, or have you considered, and then leave it at that. But if it is something that is actually a threat to the safety of a child, then you have to be mama and papa bear and say, okay, look, we have to take action.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. And Jessica, we will be getting to your question about cortisol
Yes,
levels.
one of
Yes,
my
and I believe,
favorites.
yeah, and I believe, cortisol levels, that's some of the studying that was done of children in utero. And then I also see in here, Rebecca, maybe the cortisol levels will kind of answer your question too about, some families or parents or caregivers saying, oh yeah, they felt let him cry, or I'm sorry, let them cry themselves to sleep. And if we think about nurturing responsive relationship, again, infant mental health is not just a child by themselves, it's a caregiver. It's both of them and it's their relationship. It's, not just one or the other, it's, both of them in a relationship. And if we think about crying themselves to sleep, how does that help them learn how to calm themselves down later in life? Or does it teach them to take it up a notch, take it up a notch? Or does it teach them to just be flat and not acknowledge their feelings and not say when they are sad when they become an adult because no one acknowledged it when they were young? Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, but some things to think about. Okay, so let's move to our thank you for all the questions. Wonderful, wonderful questions.
It's a
Let's move to our,
conversation.
yeah, it's a conversation. Yeah. Our brain architecture video. These are wonderful videos. They're all 2 minutes each, the bottom three. Then we'll play the one on top there, the still face experiment. And you'll kind of hear some of the things that we were talking about just now. Okay, so the first video.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Thank you for playing that for us, Bridget. So this one is serve and return. So it gives an example of literacy. When does it start? And kind of the lifespan trajectory. So we'll play this one.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life, when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
I like that video. So our next one is about toxic stress, but I usually have a trick question. So when do we start to be concerned about high school graduation? When should we start? Anyone put in the chat? Yes, in the womb. Yeah. Yep, in the womb. Yes. Yeah, so that video shows, right away, brain cells start connecting and patterns start being made. Like Michael said, narratives start being made. So right away, sometimes we think of literacy as, oh, I need to have a book. Literacy doesn't mean you have to have a book. Literacy is that serve and return. You're looking at baby, you're holding them eye to eye contact, and you're singing to them, or they're cooing to you, and you say, wow, so whatever it might be, but that's serve and return. That's literacy. That's language development. Even, just physical body acknowledgement. That's literacy and language development too. And it also builds relationships, builds social and emotional and physiologic. It all ties in. Okay, next, go ahead, play.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that video. And before we start the next one, any thoughts, reflections, thoughts? And I see, Rebecca, your comment in the chat there. So left crying, they are in a state of stress. Yes. So anytime any one of us cry or laugh, heart rate goes up, breathing goes up. The part, so there can be good stress, right? And there can also be harmful stress. So what that video just now showed us is when children have too much of that harmful stress, the cortisol that goes to the brain, that goes to the body, it says, go on high alert. I don't feel safe or something's wrong. And my heart rate goes up, my breathing goes up, and everything is going like 1,000 miles an hour inside. That puts a lot of stress on our bodies at a young age. So yes, that state of crying, their behavior is showing and communicating something. And the faster we respond in a nurturing, responsive way, the more likely they will start to calm down quicker. And you're building that, the brain is learning, building a pathway to, oh, I know if I do this, they're going to come to me quickly and support me. Yeah. Okay. See, how does this impact children whose parents choose to cry it out method to sleep train, who are otherwise in a loving family? Yeah. No judgment. Yeah. Just good question.
I will say that I recently had a physician who is incredibly well respected, who was having sleep management issues with his child. And this is a child who's 3.5 years old, about 42 months, very bright child, and didn't want to, just couldn't stand to see it. And mom was a surgeon. So they were both people who had read a lot about childhood. They were both very bright people, but struggling with sleep and struggling with the idea, are we hurting our child by allowing him to cry it out? And so there is that process that we often offer up when sleep is an issue, to try a method of incremental elimination of the desire of the parent to have to be in the room, if you will. And so, you can start by building a routine that you're going to stick to. And here's the other thing, a very limited script. It's time, sharing with them what's going to happen. And then it's now that time, we love you and good night. And you're not going to say a whole lot more than that as you're in the room. And you can be by the bed the first night, move across the room a couple of nights later, in the hallway and out. And there will be tears. But one of the things we know is that, again, we're looking at predictability and we're looking at setting routines. I am always impressed with early educators where they have 20, sometimes more than that, children, and they manage them. And they manage them because they have the routines. It's time to come in. We will take our coats off. We will do our hand washing. We will sit down and do this activity. It's almost time for lunch. So people are going to do these things. And routines are, what children want is predictability. And so the ability to work through that. Now, when you have much younger infants, again, it can be a challenge. I'm not going to lie. It can be to getting to that point where children will calm down. But if they start to learn that I can cry a little, but what really is going to happen, but they're going to be there, then you know, that predictability will start to develop in the development of the brain, and they will be all right. And I'm seeing a lot of things, and I'm trying to and again, you know, there's not one size that fits all. So I see the word exceptions, um, you know, and oh, I'm so glad that you someone entered autistic disorders. It's kind of like I was in the airport with my cousin and saw a woman breastfeeding a child that had to be about 4.5 years old. I don't know, you know, and we kind of looked at it. And my cousin, who is an engineer, but has an autistic child, just said, I wonder what type of disability that child might have, because people were looking and people were talking. I was like, I wish everyone had the wisdom that you have about this. It's like we can't judge because every relationship is very different. And so what we do need to understand is how can we support when we see a mother or a father with a child in public and, you know, just saying, you're doing great. Getting on an airplane or being on an airplane and getting off and saying, that was challenging, but you did a good job. Again, what we're trying to develop is a community, if you will. It may be an international community, it may be just where you live, but helping people by bearing witness to what they're trying to do and supporting them. And so I don't want to, you know, kind of go down that rabbit hole of, you know, like telling all my stories, but at the same time, it is about understanding that routines will guide you. If you use routines, you can get so much done with very young children. And we're always here to help if you have any questions for follow-up.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. I think the other part of that routine piece, when I've gone to classrooms, you know, seeing like, gosh, how do you manage 10 2-year-olds
Yeah.
or 10 1-year-olds? And what I've also noticed, yes, there's routines, but there's also the caregiver-child relationship that is there. They're responsive, they support, they come in, they, you know, even if they've got two in their lap and then the third one's over there calling for them, they still respond with their voice in a way that it's almost like a third arm or an eighth arm if you're an octopus, you know, like they have this way. Teachers, you know, I mean, it's the hardest teaching job, I think, is to be an
And
early
the very good ones can see it before it even, I mean, they are able to, and that's one of the challenges of being like, of doing consultation work where you can watch the rhythm or the dances that are going on and being able to assist the teacher in the classroom develop skills. Well, you know, you have that child who may be new and maybe, you know, incredibly challenged, may have challenging behaviors that can disrupt the whole classroom. And so how do you set back? And the reflective work that Don talked about is really important. But again, to a degree, it's Mr. Rogers. How do you have that calm, constant way? I mean, or the Don Yazzie, who the people who, when you talk to them, their pacing and their delivery is just so calming and soothing that you are going to follow it. It's an incredible gift. And so I look at my friend and I say, she is clearly someone who's done a lot of early child work because her words are clear, her pace is constant, and I know that, you know, when she tells me something, even in my ADD bind, it's like getting this.
Well, thank you, Michael. Hope I don't put people to sleep.
No, absolutely not. And I talked to your kids and they said otherwise. So
Yeah, I want to add one more thing about, you know, the sleep training, the, you know, that routines piece. And I think one thing that is so important to remember, just as important as routines, is are we acknowledging the child in a to support the relationship? Are we acknowledging them? And if we are, is it in a nurturing and responsive way? And I say that because, you know, I was a parent of, you know, like two little ones under 4 years old, you know, when I was a young parent. And I remember like, get up, get ready, go. I'm going to school, and get them to childcare, preschool, and the dressing them, and let's go, 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 go. I was talking at them, do, 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 do. And then I never like later I realized I didn't like stop and play with them and say, how was school? Let's play. It was just go, 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 keeping them alive. Yeah, there's hugs and kisses, goodbye, hugs and kisses at bedtime, but for, my kids, and I think back and reflect, that wasn't enough. I should have intentionally had 1 or 2 more minutes. And, I did start doing that eventually as they got like, 7, 8, 9, but not enough. And it's like, oh, my parenting, I need to, improve. But even if it's 1 or 2 minutes of, here at bedtime, here's our routine. Part of it is maybe massage with lotion, and you're looking at them, eye contact. But if the only way they get attention is picking them up, putting them back, picking them up, putting them back, picking them up, putting them back, and the rest of your day is no attention or connection, children will get attention any way they can, whether positive or negative. So keep that in mind. They need to be seen and intentionally given attention. In our busy parenting life, we have to think about that.
One moment, Mike, your microphone's messing up a bit.
No.
Yeah.
I'm going to go off for a minute.
I can hear you now. Maybe it's
Okay, I was just going to say that this is a wonderful example of where I say to my colleague and friend, give yourself grace for, those thoughts about, did I give my children maybe 1 or 2 more minutes? It's like life happens. How do we do this work, but at the same time, just allow life to happen, and there are going to be missteps. But again, the repair, the predictability, all of those things are things that go a very long way in helping healthy relationships happen.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, I see. There should be a requirement of all future parents to learn more about parenting. Yes, I could have used it. I would have been the first one to sign up. Yeah, have grace for ourselves as caregivers, as helpers, as professionals, as people who care for other people. Yes, have grace for ourselves. Okay, so let's watch this video. This is, an older video, but so important, and just seeing how children are so attuned and can see a tiny difference in a split second. So we'll go ahead and watch this one.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Hey, what are some thoughts about that video there? That was like less than a minute interaction that was so impactful to that little, lost her body posture, moved, stretched, screamed, within a split second. She's like, oh, mom's not looking at me. But then there's the repair. Mom came back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one of the takeaways is that the repair that happens. And one of the things that you see when you see this is that while despite there being that stress, because life happens. I mean, there are parents who have 2, 3 children, and moments like that will be just a flash of like, we were having this moment, mom, and now you had to go to my little brother or sister. But how beautiful was that when the mother came back and the relationship was there. The other thing I would offer, as we talked about, when we think about the harm that neglect does, is that just think about what it would mean if the mother was a substance abuser or clinically depressed, and this type of affect was all the baby would get. And then you would have this situation or moment of the baby would be okay with that. And so the fact that the child is like, hey, this is not what we normally do, that's actually a good thing. And the moment of mom coming back and the child saying, oh, okay, you're back now. Again, another indication that their routine is one that the baby has picked up on and is understanding that we can do this. Now, there are some children, and there's a lot of research on what type of personality does the child have when the reunion sequence starts. Is the child going to be avoidant? Is the child going to make the mother pay and be more difficult for the mom to reconnect with the child? And so it's just a kind of a peek at this whole world of understanding attachments and understanding the different types of relationships that parents and children have and how we can help them. And I'm trying to read the
there's a lot in there. So I see some, the child welfare system, foster care system, so many things to consider and think about when we support young children. And one of the things that I also wanted to respond to that I saw here, and thank you, Michael, for mentioning, if a mom has postpartum depression, and I saw someone put in, if they have substance, misuse disorders, how do they respond? Do they respond? Do they have the ability and strength to respond, to their child. Yeah, so many things to think about. And how does that parent get supported? Yeah, and
Absolutely.
the big takeaway of repair can happen. And I also wanted to, point out that, yeah, we're using the word trauma. And, I always forget that when we say trauma, it doesn't mean that it's clinically diagnosed trauma we're talking about. It's trauma, it's a disruption, and there can always be repair, with the caregiver. And, sometimes as a caregiver, maybe like I was a single parent with my two oldest children, and I didn't repair as often as I should have or wanted to. But having grace for myself and becoming a better parent as I got older with my other children, that part of repair is so important. So I really hope that with all of this, yes, it's hard, and it's a whole other presentation around trauma, but we just wanted to share these parts with you. That yes, life is hard, and it's something that you didn't have a choice in. Yes, Julian, thank you for putting that in the chat there. And it's how we respond to it. And each one of us has our own response. It could be the exact same thing we're experiencing, but it could be different responses. That's another thing to keep in mind with trauma as well. And this website, ZTT, if you have the slides, you click on it, it'll take you to a website that talks about, like, it shows these images here. So here's the top image, a typically developing brain. And then the bottom image, you see a little bit more dark spots, less activity, brain of a child exposed to neglect, trauma, and abuse. And we saw in that toxic stress video where if there's too much cortisol going all the time and there's no responsive caregiver, that cortisol will keep pumping, and cortisol breaks brain cell connections. So you see that more black area, less active area of the brain there. Okay.
I would also say that one of the things which I mentioned is attachment and different types of attachment. And so often people hear about reactive attachment disorder and all of these things. And again, I would hope that what we've been able to share is that the good news is that by understanding infant and early childhood mental health and just the very simple things of really supporting adults in their relationships with children, with very young children, and also the ability to identify and address challenging behaviors at a very young age will go a long way into adulthood and into relationships. And again, those things we talk about, repair, it's just so important, and it's an ongoing process. But when we're mindful of it, then it's really important. And I saw someone earlier mention the concept that they didn't identify it as the ghost in the nurseries. We're talking about if I experienced this as a child and I'm okay, perhaps you should be too. Or, it's what I experienced and I don't or do want to do that. And so it's one of those things that that whole work, I think Lenore's here, I sometimes miss that up, who wrote that book, Ghost in the Nurseries. It's an interesting concept of that the experiences we have when we are very young do have a presence in our adulthood, and so what does that mean about how we parent and how we parent. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's okay. No, you're fine, Michael. Yeah, and not to say that this is it, this is the end all be all. There can always be repair. And with building brain cell connections, that can always happen, particularly more powerful in this age range. And I see Julian put in the chat, early intervention is key. Yes. Research, a lot of research out there now that, if you have access to quality home visiting services, if you have access to quality childcare, quality, high quality preschool, or if you have a teacher who is really responsive to young children in a classroom, that can do a lot of repair as well. Even if children are having a hard time at home, let's say they saw a fight between caregivers at home the night before, they didn't sleep, but they come to childcare. And if you have a teacher that's really supportive, provides responsive caregiving, there's still repair that can happen. You give the child another way of seeing an adult, in a relationship that is supportive.
No, no, I'm sorry, my friend. I know you know so much more about this than me, but I'm we do this work. So many of the people here are interested in this work because they care. And sometimes that caring can make us vulnerable to having heavy feelings after a day's work with a child or children. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit about the reflective work or um, that whole process of monitoring your reactions to the work that we do.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't know if I think I put it in here, but yeah. Let me really quickly. So that part of learning how to, yes, Lori, we will start. Yeah, we have only a few, like what, 7 minutes left. So that part of, repair is so important with ourselves too, recognizing it. And, if maybe I saw someone put in the chat earlier, and same for me, I wasn't taught to acknowledge my feelings until I got older in my life. And I saw someone said, until their
Me too.
20s, they started to teach themselves how to acknowledge their feelings. It's the same thing with when you care for others, you pour, 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 and our glass can become empty. So just understanding that if you're in a role where you care for others as a profession or even at home, it's a lot of pouring out. When do you stop, breathe, and pour back to yourself and give back to yourself? One thing that I do sometimes is just before I go to sleep is just take some deep breaths. In the morning in Navajo, we pray to the east, morning dawn. Right before the sun comes up, that's when I breathe in, slowly inhale, and think about my day. And then evening, before I go to sleep, just those moments of breathing are things that help me. And to think about, okay, how was my day? How was I with my little one? What could I have done differently? What could I say? Just like no thought and just what's under my feet? Is the air cool? What sounds do I hear? Sometimes it's just that for 30 seconds is, sometimes all I need. Sometimes we need more. Sometimes it's running. If you're a runner and mover, that's how you calm down. Sometimes it's loud music and you're singing along, and then it's okay. Sometimes people can think in loud music. My little one, he can think in loud music. Yeah. So definitely reflection is so important. This is kind of self-explanatory on this slide, but just an example of how if there's neglect, it can stunt growth. So if we think about, pediatricians out there, nurses out there, there is a diagnosis of failure to thrive. And if they can't find any other medical, rule out other medical things, we also need to think about possible trauma, possible disruptions in the attachment relationships. We need to think about, neglect. Those can have an influence on physical growth and development. The the attachment relationships between caregivers and children. So next slide, let's see what we have left. And yeah, thank you for putting that in the chat, Jolene, the resource. Yes. So what do you do to support relationships? And we shared this a little earlier, have a child-led play time, child-led conversation times, let them lead it, and we follow along in that. 1 to 2 minutes, supporting them. Here's 2 resources that really help in learning about infant mental health, learning about how to be as a caregiver of others, supporting others. You support families maybe, and families have young children in their families. But really thinking about how all of these things come in and affect us in the way we are every day.
Thank
resource.
you so much, Don and Michael, for all of that great information. This is a really great presentation that you will all get a copy of, and it has some links in there that are so very helpful, great resources. Michael and Don have done a great job in providing a lot of resources here for you. And thank you so much for all of your comments. It's, I had to come in late because of another thing I had going on, but I've been reading the chat, and you all have been so involved and involved with what they were talking about. So thank you, Michael and Don. Thank you. That was awesome. We will be back after the holidays because we're always on the last Wednesday of every month, and it's Thanksgiving and then it's Christmas. Can't believe it's happening, but it is. So we'll be back in January, and we're going to have a fatherhood engagement discussion with a couple of fathers who can give us some really great feedback on how to engage fathers and why is that so important to have fathers involved. So you will get a completed certificate of completion from CARS. You can get a copy of this presentation, and recording will be on the NTAC's website, which you can see there. So if you need to go back and look or listen to it again, or you have more questions, feel free to tell us. You're also going to get a copy of a survey, a short little survey that tells us how to make our presentations better and more appropriate for all of you as listeners and participants. So it just gives us a better way to improve our work. Next one then, Bridget. So these are just the new websites for NTAC, and please feel free, if you have a need for any technical assistance of any kind, to contact NTAC, and they will push it to the right people, Michael and Don, or me at Fredla, or somebody else, depending on what your needs are. You'll certainly get that information from NTAC. Thank you again, Don and Michael. You've been awesome, and you've been great to work with. Anything else that you have, please feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Okay, thank you, and have a great day, everyone. Bye.